We welcome you to The Future in Autism, sponsored by Future Horizons, world leader in conferences and resources on Asperger's and autism. All of our speakers that we'll be bringing to you in the coming weeks are experts who not only give great information, but care about our kids. Welcome to today's show. Hello, Temple. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine.
I understand we are reaching you in the great city of Atlanta, where you just gave a talk. How did everything go?
Oh, it went really super well. Lots and lots of questions.
Good. Temple, you are a college professor and a world leader in the field of animal handling, working particularly with cattle. Yet you were also diagnosed as having some of the characteristics associated with autism. How did you overcome this challenge to be so successful?
First of all, I want to emphasize the importance of early educational intervention. I had excellent schooling by the time I was 2.5. I was in a wonderful speech therapy program. I had a nanny that taught me turn taking. We've got to teach these little kids how to take turns. We've got to teach them how to do things other people ask them to do. When I was little, we played a lot of board games. And then when I was in high school and I was a goof-around student and just having a lot of problems, I had a great science teacher who got me interested in science. You know, these mentors are very important. I'm finding that a lot of these students that are successful, there was a teacher, like in high school, maybe in college, maybe somebody out in the workplace that taught the kid a skill, like computer programming or industrial design or journalism, or some other field.
Gotcha. Temple, everyone knows there's been a huge increase in the number of children diagnosed with autism. Why do you think we are seeing this increase?
Some of it's just increased diagnosis. The Asperger's, which is the mild autism, they have always been here. Today, Mozart, Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, and a number of other people would be diagnosed either with Asperger's or with autism. The engineering, you go out in the tech companies, it's all full of, mild Asperger's people. That's what enables you to have computers and things like cell phones. But where I think there's been a true increase is some of this regressive autism, where the kid seems to be normal, and then at 18 months to age 2, they lose language. And I think that segment actually has increased.
I see. I understand that one of the speakers with you today was Dr. Jim Ball, and he was speaking on early diagnosis. Did you and Jim talk about that very much, or do you have any thoughts about how to be diagnosing a child early?
Well, the first thing is, do you have delayed speech? Mother realized when I was 2 years old that I was not behaving like the little girl next door who's the same age. So you have delayed speech, the child doesn't interact with you, the child just sits and stims and rocks, there's a lot of tantrums, the child might appear like he's deaf once you've ruled out deafness. You have a child, it's obvious. A young autistic child is obvious. Don't wait. The worst thing you can do with a young autistic child that's 2 or 3 years old, or maybe 4 or 5 years old, is nothing. You need to work with them on early educational intervention like now, and have at least 20 hours a week with a really, really good teacher, one-to-one.
Now, there's another section of the actual autism spectrum called Asperger's syndrome. How would you first diagnose a child that has Asperger's syndrome, and usually at about what age?
Well, Asperger's syndrome, the child is when he's 2 and 3 and 4 years old. I mean, he seems to be fine, maybe kind of a bit precocious. Then in 3rd or 4th grade, he doesn't seem to have any friends. The thing about the Asperger kids is we've got to work on developing their area of strength. And the same thing with the high-functioning autistic kid. I was good at art. Everything was done to address my ability in art and encourage my ability in art. Child likes trains, teach reading with trains. Teach history with trains. Take that thing the kid's fixated on and broaden it out into things that can turn into hobbies and turn into careers.
Okay. Temple, you often hear the term high-functioning autism and you hear the term Asperger's syndrome. Can you tell us what some of the differences are, or are they so close that it's really hard to be telling?
Well, the problem with these diagnostic categories is they're not precise, like diagnosing something like tuberculosis. If a child has speech delay, obvious speech delay, and then the other autistic behavior, then it's autism. Asperger's is no obvious speech delay. It's just a milder variant. And then there's a point where Asperger's just becomes geek or nerd or engineer. Autism is a continuum, going from brilliant scientists and engineers and computer programmers down to somebody that remains nonverbal.
Okay. Temple, some of the people listening to this program today are probably going to be educators, some in regular classrooms, some special ed. If you could give 3 or 4 tips to educators, what would they be?
Well, the first thing is, autistic and Asperger minds are specialist minds. I'm a visual thinker. I think in photorealistic pictures. I'm really, really bad in algebra. Some of these kids need to skip algebra, go to geometry and trig. Another kind of specialist mind is a pattern thinker. They're really, really good at music and math, but they may have problems with reading. And then the third kind is kind of a word fact mind. They know all of these verbal facts. They're not a visual thinker. Develop the area of strength. And I talk about this a lot more in my book, Thinking in Pictures.
Okay. Temple, obviously some of the people listening to this today will have older children that have autism that may be going into the workforce. Can you tell me some of the jobs that somebody with Asperger's syndrome or high functioning autism may be good at, and some they may be very, very bad at?
You must avoid multitasking. These kids absolutely cannot multitask. Some of the entry-level jobs, like cashier in a busy restaurant, I would be fired. If the person is a visual thinker, let's use jobs that use visual thinking. Photography, graphic design, cartooning, industrial design. These are all visual thinking jobs. The music and math guys, they're going to be good at computer programming, good at engineering, and the word mind. I've been interviewed by a lot of journalists that I'm sure are Asperger, and they're the word mind. They're also really good at a lot of library and archiving type jobs. Another thing I want to emphasize is we've got to pay attention to the sensory issues. A lot of people on the spectrum, both high and low functioning, cannot tolerate the flicker of fluorescent lights. It makes them feel like they're in a discotheque. Certain loud noises bother them. And there needs to be a lot more research done on the sensory problems because they can be extremely debilitating. Even now, I cannot tolerate itchy, scratchy things against my skin.
Okay. Temple, I understand that some of the people that come up to you at the end of conferences are always ask you questions about their own child. If many of the listeners out here today, I think, are going to be family members, what recommendations would you give to family members as to how to help the young person or the young man that has autism or Asperger's syndrome?
First of all, you need to recognize sensory issues. And if you have a problem with behavior, you've got to ask yourself, is it sensory? There are some children and adults that absolutely cannot go to big supermarkets. Too many fluorescent lights, too many smells. They're just overwhelmed sensory. So they have a temper tantrum every time they go in there. That's sensory. And you've got to differentiate between that and bad behavior. You know, and I can tell you, I was always pushing the limits. I knew which house in the neighborhood I could be naughty. And in the 50s, I was taught manners. I was taught to say please and thank you. I was taught not to be rude. These things need to be taught one specific thing at a time. I could go into a store and shop because I was taught not to pull things off the shelves. Just has to be taught, sort of like acting in a play. And my 50s upbringing also has really helped me.
Okay. Temple, we understand that you'll be speaking on July 17th in beautiful Dixon, Illinois, which happens to be the home of Ronald Reagan. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other people speaking with you there?
Well, Tony Atwood's going to be there, and he has a very good book on Asperger's. It's kind of a short book, and I like his short book. We've got to work on developing the area of strength because I work in a technical field, and some people say that only 20% of Asperger's get employed. That's not a complete sample. Because if you work in a technical field like computer programming or engineering, there's Asperger's 40 years up and up all over the workplace because they were taught social skills when they were very young. You know, you want the Silicon Valley, and those Silicon Valley parents, they have printed those kids into computer programming. Started around 8 or 10 to start teaching programming. You know, somebody's got to work with them. This mentors, again, I cannot emphasize enough, especially when you get on the high end of the spectrum. the importance of mentors, like my science teacher. Goofing around in school, I was interested in studying. I didn't have a goal. And when I had a goal of becoming a scientist. You know, one parent today said, well, my kid's really interested in endangered species. Well, okay, let's get him involved in environmental things. Or another kid loves elephants. I said, read about elephants. Do math with elephants. Learn about the behavior of elephants. Learn about how they talk with low-frequency sound through the ground. Use elephants, you know, that to motivate things that can turn into hobbies and careers. And we've got to do a lot more thinking about what are they going to do when they grow up. I see smart Asperger kids graduating from college, no job skills. We need to start teaching those skills. Things like being on time, things like turn taking, things like being polite.
Okay. Temple, I understand that this conference on July 17th and 18th in Dixon, that any of our listeners from anywhere in the world can actually see and hear you. How is that?
Well, I think that's just absolutely wonderful, and one of the things that really makes me happy is when I have a parent or I have somebody on the spectrum come up to me and saying, you know, something they read in my book, Thinking of Pictures, or any of my books, really helped them understand their child. That makes me really happy, because I want people on the spectrum to end up having a good life. Yeah.
Now, but this conference you're doing, how will people around the world be able to be seeing you and to be hearing you?
Well, it's my understanding you're going to be broadcasting it over the internet.
I got you. So if they want to see you and hear you over the internet on July 17th and Tony Atwin on the 18th, how would they get more information?
Well, they could go to the Future Horizons webpage. That's fhautism.com. That's one place to get some more information. I've got a number of stuff on the webpage, autism.org. You know, they can get some further information there.
Okay.
You know, if they're in the U.S., they might want to contact the Autism Society of America. I just can't emphasize enough, you know, if you're a parent with a young child, you've got to start doing early intervention. Let's say you're somewhere in the world where there's no services. Well, then maybe get some grandmothers, get some students, anybody to work with this little kid. Because the worst thing you could do with an autistic 3-year-old is let him sit in front of the TV all day rocking. Doing nothing's the worst thing you can do. Gotcha.
Okay, Temple, thank you very much. It's really great talking to you. We'll look forward to be hearing from you on July 17th.
Okay, great.
Thank you, kiddo. Bye-bye. The information you have just heard is general in nature and is not to be used as a diagnosis on any child or adult. For information or for an accurate diagnosis, contact professionals in your area. We wish you well.